Also meeting with King Charles at Buckingham Palace. We start in the Middle East, and the death toll from Israeli airstrikes on Gaza has risen to at least 220, with many victims being women, children and the elderly. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency confirms the devastating toll as Israel's military operation continues. An Israeli official stated that the offensive targeting Hamas leadership and infrastructure will last as long as necessary. Meanwhile, Hamas accuses Israel of violating a ceasefire agreement after Israel launched heavy strikes earlier on Tuesday. Israel's government says these attacks are in response to Hamas's refusal to release hostages despite multiple ceasefire proposals. Joining us to discuss these latest developments is Dr. Veselin Ivanov-Popovsky, who is a professor and vice dean at the Jindal Global Law School, joining us from Delhi. Dr. Popovsky, thank you very much for being here. We have, of course, returned to action in Gaza. We've heard there, of course, that Hamas have sort of denounced these attacks, and what they've said is that this is a death wish to the hostages. Is that something you think we will see in the coming days?
Yes, obviously a very worrying news. The resumption of hostilities with the Israeli airstrikes on Hamas, although they could have been expected because since the beginning of March there are no peace negotiations. The first ceasefire ended on the 1st of March. On the 2nd of March, there were attempts to resume the negotiations, but both sides possibly put demands that the other side didn't accept. Israel obviously wants the 59 remaining hostages released. Hamas responded that they will release only 4 dead bodies and 1 Israeli-American captive, which definitely is psychological pressure on the relatives. Not to release the dead body is really unbelievable in the history of warfare. So the strike also liquidated a senior security officer, Mahmoud Abu Wawah, who is the most senior security officer of Hamas, Deputy Minister of Interior, which could be regarded as a targeted precision strike. Still 220 is a high toll. So I'm not saying that Israel doesn't take precautions. They obviously did, but we will see the final. Al Jazeera already lifted that number to 236. So we are watching and we will see what happens next. But the situation is very serious.
Yes, Defence Minister Israel Katz has said Israel has returned to fighting in Gaza. Does that mean any thought of a ceasefire is now over and we will return to what we saw before the first phase was agreed?
Well, let's see the response of Hamas. So far, they are saying they are not going to resume hostilities. They are possibly trying to get to a negotiations. So if this strike this morning is only to make Hamas negotiate, it could be limited to that. There won't be a further kind of aggravation and a further escalation of the warfare. So we will see in the next hours and days whether Hamas will agree to negotiate the release of remaining hostages, which is kind of a very normal in any ceasefire. Ceasefires are about releasing hostages. And the question is why Hamas doesn't want to continue releasing hostages. Those deaths could be in groups of 5 or 10, but without doing that, the chances of peace are very minimal.
Yes, one key player that we've seen in these discussions is the United States. How do you think Donald Trump and his administration will respond, given their outright support for Israel throughout these negotiations and the conflict as well?
We continue the same voices from Washington immediately that they are going to continue and even increase the support. Donald Trump is pushing the Congress to approve another $4 billion package to help Israel. And his rhetoric is also that hell will unleash on all those who do not negotiate. And he means not only Hamas, but also Houthis, also Hezbollah. So that rhetoric, on one hand, possibly it's good to hear that United States is continuing the commitment to the Middle East. On another hand, it looks as less competent and less negotiable because Witkoff tried hard to bring Hamas and Israel around the table already. It looks that we have an incompetence actors and Hamas unwilling to negotiate, which means of his political career. If they negotiate, and kind of the raison d'etre, reason to destroy Israel institution. It's a very negotiation, a very difficult perspective.
Yes, and we know that Israel did consult the United States before carrying out these strikes. Of course, a White House comment, hell will break loose. But talking about all hell, and to end this discussion, Dr. Popovsky, I want to think about now the impact that we will have within Gaza. We know, of course, the situation was already dire. Aid wasn't getting in for at least a couple of weeks now. Of course, a lot of Gaza, some of Gaza really is
bad resumption of the way Hamas is fighting is basically hiding behind human shields. They live together. The family. In a way, the Israeli military know that. So in terms of international humanitarian law, Israel is trying civilian casualties, but on another hand, it's very enemy and civilians. So situation feels looking bad, but is that Hamas take the release of the hostages, which will make, so it's very simple. If Hamas releases, in exchange by the Westerners, in Israel, the end of at least this silence that.
Dr. Popov, so much for joining us. We will of the today coming these three reports. 50 off just with